So my name is Andreas Refsgaard, and I'm an interaction designer and creative coder from Denmark. And first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's a really big honor. I'm going to talk about 3 things in my presentation today. I'm going to talk about how I use inputs and outputs as an interaction designer, how I use machine learning in a sort of playful way, and a few tips if anybody wants to get started and copy some of the stuff I do. Let's see. So a lot of my work deals with very unconventional mappings between inputs and outputs. Essentially, a lot of the projects can be boiled down to something as simple as something you control with something else. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of those from when I was a student. My first project that I'm going to show is called Eye Conductor. I made it as my thesis project. Let's just see it. And we need sound for this one, and for everything actually. It's a musical instrument for people with physical disabilities that allows them to play by only using their eyes and facial gestures. This is a sequencer where if I look at one point for 2 seconds, then I insert a beat. Åbn munden. The next project is this one. It's a bit more silly. It's an unconventional painting application where I use headlines from a Danish tabloid newspaper called Ekstrabladet to draw different things. So I call it painting with gossip. The next one is a piece called Video Painter that allows people to paint with layers of video instead of painting with static brushes. Okay, but the main topic of my talk today is machine learning and how I combine machine learning and interaction design. And often when people hear the term machine learning, they sort of go like this. They think of it as something super complicated, some sort of hidden away black box that not even the people who build the algorithms can truly understand. Maybe not you guys, but a lot of people at least. But there's another side to machine learning, and the stuff I do is fairly simple. I often just send raw streams of data to a simple supervised machine learning algorithm and train it to distinguish between a few different things. And I'm going to show you a quick example of that here. Hey, I'm going to attempt to build a rock, paper, scissors classifier using processing, Weakinator, and the leap motion in 1 minute. So first I have a processing sketch which sounds out the XYZ of all my 5 fingertips, which means that I'm listening for 15 input values. I only have 1 output, which is a classifier with 3 classes for rock, papers, and scissors. So now I'm ready to start the processing sketch. And first off, I'm going to train the rock. So the rock would look like this. And I'm going to start recording examples of the rock. Then I have the paper. Record some of those. And finally the scissors. Record some of those. And then I can train and I can run. So we have the scissors, the rock, the paper, the rock, scissors, rock, paper. Okay, so for me as an interaction designer and from my perspective, there's a lot of clear benefits in using machine learning. First of all, you can prototype without coding, which means that you can start building things a lot faster instead of kind of just talking about them. You can also let users train and decide on what the interaction should be, which I'll give an example of later on. And then you can use really complicated inputs that would be hard to account for if you were coding, such as raw video streams or raw audio streams. So again, if you recall my previous statement about something that you control with something else, then with machine learning, it's quite easy to make these weird combinations. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. So in this project, I used a face tracker and then this tool called Weakinator. And I tried to train it to classify different facial expressions. And I don't know if it's something you've encountered, but a few years ago, a lot of my friends started sending me like really specific emojis and reaction GIFs, and I didn't really know how to respond. So instead of like trying to find the right emotions and emotional GIFs and emojicons, I tried, okay, what if I train a system to know what I mean by just doing facial expressions. So you see the whole process here. I again send raw streams of data to an algorithm, and then I teach it what I mean by being neutral, having a neutral facial expression, a surprised facial expression, an excited facial expression, a sad one, and a flirty one where I do like a kissing mouth. And then I try to test it out. And it's pretty good at the first couple of expressions, the neutral, the surprised, and the really excited one. But as soon as I start being flirty, it doesn't really pick it up. And maybe it's this thing that we Scandinavian people have. We can't really tell whether we're flirting or just being neutral. But in this case, I give it more examples to say that it's actually when I do this kissing mouth. And then it starts to learn. Then it still has a hard time figuring out whether I'm sad or neutral. Maybe that's also a Scandinavian thing, I don't know. But again, I give it more examples. And instead of having to recode everything, I kind of just retrain it to understand what I mean. Okay, another example also using a face tracker is this one, where it's a photo booth that takes pictures if you look like a prune in the face, if you do this. Otherwise, it doesn't take any pictures. It's genius, right? I tried to sell it a lot of times. Nobody bought it yet. So maybe if somebody wants an innovative idea, you can have it. Here's some of the pictures it took. Okay, but of course, all of it is not just fun and games and small experiments. Sometimes you have to do client work. So some of the projects I did in collaboration with another Danish designer and artist called Lasse Korsgaard got picked up by Google Creative Lab. And they asked us to help them prototype machine learning directly on the web in a browser setting. So we made Teachable Machine, which is a system or a website where users can teach a machine learning algorithm directly in the browser and map it to different outputs. In this case, it's mapped to speech synthesis. And here's a guy called Baron who made this wonderful tweet about training the website to make a classifier that would determine whether something was a hot dog or not a hot dog. Let's have a look at it.
Not hot dog. Not hot dog. Hot dog. Not hot dog. Hot dog. Not hot dog. Not hot dog. Hot dog. Not hot dog. Hot dog. Not hot dog. Hot dog. Not hot dog.
Look how happy he is, right? So the reason why he's super happy, I think, that's my guess, is because he decided on this interaction. And when we made the system, we didn't like design it for somebody to train whether something was a hot dog or not a hot dog. That's of course super silly. But the idea here is that he, in a very few, in a minute or two, gave it a lot of examples of what he thought was a hot dog and not a hot dog. And then he made the experience his own. This is a project called Doodle Toons. It's made in collaboration with an American artist for a hackathon in South Korea. And we trained an algorithm to recognize drawings of 4 different musical instruments. And then it would automatically play music if it saw new drawings on paper with some of those instruments.
Yes. Yeah.
A fun thing happened about a year later. We found out that Airbnb were using our tool to create a prototyping software that would create web content from simple sketches. And that's something you do a lot as a designer. You kind of sketch something out, but the magic about their tool was that it would actually create websites. So you can see on the right, it's just our tool, but then instead of having it output music, it outputs HTML. It's interesting sometimes how artists can become the unpaid research and development of big companies. But it's all good. Okay, so these tools can of course be used for meaningful things, but most of the time I kind of like to make really silly and really useless stuff. And in this project, I tried to make a classifier that would distinguish between funky and boring images. And of course, that's a bit absurd. Like, what is funky and what is boring is highly subjective. But machine learning algorithms are increasingly moving into the territory of the subjective. So I thought, why not? And essentially, you can search for any keyword you want, and then you'll get images from the internet, and then you can click them and have the algorithm tell you whether they think that the image is funky or not funky. And then it will play back music and graphics depending on how funky or boring images you show it. And it's just trained on my very, very subjective opinion of what is funky and boring. So let's have a look. So now it's going to search for carpets. Raise your hand if you think that carpets are funky. Okay, boring. How many people think it's boring? So the algorithm also thinks it's boring?
No.
And then the more carpets you show it, the worse the music gets, and the graphics become glitchy. Okay, how about taxes? Who thinks taxes is funky? I think taxes is boring. Yeah, let's see what the algorithm thinks. It doesn't like taxes either. Here you see some of the stuff it's been trained on, like very, very subjective stuff. Okay, how about parties? Raise your hand if you think parties is gonna be funky. We'll see. It likes parties, and slowly the music becomes better. Okay, I think that's enough. I mentioned earlier that machine learning allows you to prototype really fast and prove a basic idea for an interaction in minutes. And recently, me and my friend Lasse started doing experiments using sound as the input. In the first experiments, it was to play games. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so apparently everybody thinks this is really funny. So we thought, let's make it a bit more tricky. Like, what if it's not a game where you can only do one thing? What if you can do a lot of things? Like a shooting game, you have to go left, right, go forward, go backwards. Maybe you have to shoot something, and you have to open doors. So you need a sound for each of those actions. And here you see me playing the game. Yeah, so it becomes a very, very long game. Okay, so maybe this was a bit over the top. So when we got asked by Kick Festival in Belgium to do something for kids, because we had already made these 2 prototypes in like, and I'm being honest, they were made in less than 2 hours each. Then we knew more or less what to do and what level of difficulty would be appropriate for kids. So we made this game. Okay. One final project I want to show you, also related to machine learning, is a project called An Algorithm Watching a Movie Trailer. And the movie trailer that we chose was for Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. And the algorithm we chose was an algorithm called YOLO 2. And YOLO 2 is an algorithm that's really interesting because it's able not only to detect what is in an image, but also where is the thing at. So you can kind of see already here, it detects person, a lot of books, and then maybe if you're kind of close, you can see that it also thinks that there's a cell phone on the beard of the guy. And of course that's wrong, but if you sort of look at a cell phone, it is like a black box, and his beard to some extent looks like a black box. So we were really interested in these mistakes, but we were also interested in trying to put ourselves into the perspective of the algorithm. When an algorithm watches a film, what does it actually see? And this algorithm is really good at detecting a lot of stuff, but there's also so many things it cannot detect. It has no clue what they are. So we thought, let's remove all of that, and let's only keep the stuff it's able to detect. And it looks like this.
My name is Jordan Belfort. The year I turned 26, I made $49 million, which really pissed me off because it was 3 shy of $1 million a week. We're making a name for ourselves.
Nobody knows if the stock is going to go up, down, sideways, or in circles. You know what a fugazi is?
Oh, Fugazi, it's a fake.
Yeah, fugazi, it's a wazi, it's a woozy, it's a fairy dust.
Then we also made a version where it would automatically censor everything it recognized, and then a very abstract one only using the bounding boxes. And then we started getting a lot of requests by people who wanted to, even though we didn't make YOLO, it's just an open source algorithm, a lot of people said, oh, I have all these images, like try to run YOLO through them. And we did it in this case with the images personal images from a Norwegian artist called Daniel Pajda. And I really like this image because it's able to detect 2 things. It's able to detect a car and a kite. And the car, that's in a way that's correct. It's also very impressive because the car is very small, it's out of focus, it's even somewhat hidden behind trees. The kite is, of course, maybe not correct, but this algorithm only has 80 categories, so out of those 80 categories, if it didn't pick maybe cow or person, then kite is quite a good guess. And it's also, in a way, a very poetic guess. And like me being a bit of maybe interaction designer or artist, I don't always make useful stuff. I kind of like to make things that's a bit sort of poetic. And I think right now we live in a time where these machine learning algorithms will make a lot of mistakes. And you can choose to be really annoyed by it, but you can also choose to embrace it. So I try to collect instances where they make mistakes. Here is a giraffe. And here is a toilet that I drank a month ago in Berlin. Okay, I'm running a bit out of time, so I'll just show you some tools for getting started. And I don't intend for all of you to become artists, but I think it's important to maybe try to get hands-on with some of these techniques, especially for people like you in this room who, as Gertrude just said, are in the driving seat of forming digital strategies. It's really nice for you to potentially try to be hands-on with these things and not only discuss them. So Wikinator is a really, really nice tool. It works as a bridge between a lot of inputs and outputs, and you can train the relationships between those. So that's a really good place to start. Then there's a thing called ML4A, Machine Learning for Artists, mainly the work of Gene Kogan. Super nice, a bit more advanced stuff. And then finally, ML5JS, which is friendly machine learning for the web, maybe the most accessible thing. You can actually just go to the website and try to train your own algorithm in a few minutes. And of course, all of these tools are open source. I'm going to end my talk with a project that never really went anywhere, maybe because it's really bad, but I think it's important to experiment as much as you can and also share your failures as well as your successes. So here we go. Okay, thank you. That's it.